I met him early in my journey at one of these churches down in Orlando, Florida. His name is Alan Williams. Alan has had a pretty extensive military career, and I've just let him go ahead and introduce himself first of all. Good morning, Alan. How are you, brother?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Mark.
Perfect, perfect. Like, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and tell a little bit people how you got to this path, and what brought you on this journey, and we'll go on from there.
All right, sure thing. Well, I would have to say, starting out, what brought me to this journey was just my own personal recognition of like the trauma I had sustained in combat. I definitely had gone through childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, things like that. But I don't believe that it was until my combat experience that I realized how deeply that affected me.
Hmm.
And at that time, this was around 2006, 2007. So I was a young man. I didn't really have a lot of life experience. I just kind of did my duty, went about my job, climbed the ranks, and that's at least what I assumed my military career would be.
Right.
Um, but of course, when I was in combat, I witnessed some very jarring issues, incidences. We lost 3 men within 2 weeks of our first deployment, and my truck was part of the QRF, what we call a quick reaction force or quick reaction team.
Hmm.
And we were called to provide support. And when we got there, the truck was already on fire, and we were given the order to guard the truck. The Marines at the time, they had been rendered unconscious from an explosion, and we couldn't save them. So that was probably the most jarring thing that occurred to me, because it really put into perspective the conflict of like my moral code, mercy, following orders versus I guess reacting and doing the humanistic thing of wanting to save your fellow Marine.
Right.
Um, both deployments were very stressful. We saw a lot of sustained direct combat, and our job was strictly to patrol the main supply route and the neighboring communities and the neighborhoods that were around in the farmlands that were around that main supply route. So we were always on patrol every day, sometimes 12 hours a day. Mainly supposed to be a 6 hour kind of turnaround, but it was pretty stressful. Um, Getting back from my first deployment, I realized how bad. And at that time, I didn't know I had PTSD. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I had just realized I couldn't sleep. I started. It was so easy to get alcohol, and alcohol was everywhere. I just started drinking. Um, I had realized, in hindsight, of course, as I was doing all these things, I was just a young man doing what I thought I needed to do to continue doing my job. In
Yep.
the Marine Corps, I was an infantryman. So we have a lot of philosophies that we train into ourselves that um, revolve around pain is weakness leaving the body. Um, don't admit that you have like an issue, because that's admitting weakness. And by doing so, you're not really giving your training and all of the things inside of you that you put into practice the ability to like heal through you
Hmm.
and get the job done, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to mix up medicine terminology and Marine Corps terminology, just
Yeah,
so
just free flow. Yeah, just free flow.
misunderstanding. Yeah, but yeah, in 2006, 2007, I had come home. I was really bad with alcohol. I think I had also torn my rotator cuff, so I was giving a regimen of pain pills.
Right.
And in that mixture, it was just the perfect concoction to make me not have to feel anything. I would drink myself to sleep so I wouldn't have nightmares. And still within this, there was an awareness. that I was bad off.
Right.
I was caught in this addictive kind of cycle of dependent on my pain pills, which were given to me prescription, but then also utilizing alcohol, which is, I mean, a terrible, terrible combination.
Absolutely.
So I think around that time, I was doing my own research into. I had stumbled across a documentary series or a documentary movie called DMT: The Spirit Molecule,
Interesting.
and it was one of the first documentaries that I remember kind of piqued my curiosity into entheogens themselves and the practical application of certain chemical compounds and things that had seemed to be uh, illegalized or stigmatized or any of that. And in that same time period, um, there were some documentaries coming out regarding MDMA as a way to help combat depression and there was just a lot of things that I was researching at the time that I didn't know how to implement or integrate into my life at the time because I was just so gung ho Marine Corps,
Right. Absolutely.
and I had my own thoughts around cannabis, around anything that at that point in time would hinder my military career. So I took a lot of things with a grain of salt. I still was exercising daily. I didn't think I was that bad until I got out of the Marine Corps.
Right.
And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I stopped exercising as much. I wasn't eating as healthy because I didn't have
What year was that, Alan? What year did you get
two,
out of the Marine Corps?
2009 was when I got out of my enlistment.
Gotcha.
Um, so yeah, 2009, I kind of stuck around my hometown that summer, but in that was also like right after the recession hit, and a lot of
Right.
the economy around here was really unstable. So I moved to Tampa, and when I moved to Tampa, I had a lot of odd jobs. I started out as a salesman. I kind of trained under a lot of different sales tactics, like learning how to speak clearly and be more communicative and that kind of thing. But obviously, it didn't. It kind of didn't give me any purpose. It felt like at the end of the day, I was just making money for other companies, or I was convincing customers to do something they didn't really want to do.
Mm.
And I tried to segue into more of something that reflected my military background with security. I was doing like security jobs and then bar back jobs and security jobs at bars. And again, the same kind of thing. I was inundated and surrounded by people that were drinking alcohol. I mean, the club scene at that time in Tampa was pretty rowdy. So it was I was still dealing with a lot of like having to kick people out of bars and how to stand up to like really big dudes that would always size me up, and I was like, oh my god, like this is not what I need for myself. I'm still
Right.
perpetuating this stress filled environment. I'm still perpetuating these patterns in my head by being in bar scenes. I was drinking still. I was still utilizing my pain meds, and at this time my intentions were like I wanted to get away from all that.
Right.
I wanted to I wanted to understand where this addictive principle or mindset was coming from and why I was utilizing it so much, like every day. Like, I mean, I got to the point to where I was probably drinking at least half a fifth of liquor a day, and that was on like the easy end.
Yeah.
And on the
Well,
bad end, I was just like throwing cocktails of stuff together so I could mitigate my trauma responses and my sleep patterns and all that.
yeah, you're just numbing the pain. You're numbing the pain is all we're doing. So,
Hmm.
then this continued on for probably many years, and we sit in this stuck zone that we don't really know how to get out of because we don't know. We're just stuck. So Bring us to
Resources at that time were very minimal too when it came to the understanding of PTSD, the mental health trauma, and all the things. I mean, they even were still trying to understand shell shock, and
right.
then create a new understanding for the Gulf War vets and all of the things they went through up to us. So I mean, everything was always shifting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that stuck feeling. I mean, yeah, I was in that stuck feeling from 2006 to probably about 2010
Yeah.
when yeah, I started really pushing myself. Well, I did have an awakening moment, negatively in a way. I was at a pool party and I was drinking at that pool party,
Mhm.
and I gave up my keys. I had intended to stay there, spend the night, all of that, and my consciousness literally goes from jumping into the pool and waking up in the back of a cop car.
Hmm.
And when this happened, I was so terrified. I didn't know what happened. I assumed something happened at the party, but the officer had told me that I was drinking and driving. And I was like, "What? That doesn't make any sense." I had given up my keys at this party. I'd done all these things to make sure that I was staying there, and I wasn't going to drive. I had a whole plan. And so when he told me that, and I'm waking up in the back of a cop car, my swim trunks were still wet, and I'm not wearing anything but swim trunks. So the whole scene was just so confusing. And then when he told me I was driving my vehicle and I had no recollection of getting in my car, driving it at all, I was terrified, Mark.
And then
And
what
it really,
happened there? What was the whole situation? What was that?
well, the whole situation was basically, in hindsight, I was just getting really wasted with some friends, and I think at the time, a girl I was interested wanted me to come visit her,
Oh,
and and I left the party, and all of my friends said that I had no reason to leave. They said I just like got all my stuff together and left. And that was just such a strange thing because about 15 minutes before I left, my friends that lived with me at our apartment had left to go home. And they left 15 minutes before me and asked me, they're like, "You're staying here tonight, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I remember all of that. So just the lapse in judgment, the lapse in memory, the lapse of just self control and motor control was enough to scare me. And at that moment, I couldn't do anything but surrender to the choices I had made, and I had to go through treatment through the VA. The Florida law system crushed me because I mean it was my first DUI, and at that time I blew a .226,
wow.
and yeah, terrified, man. I like I said, I didn't know I was driving my vehicle. And through going through treatment and really hammering down on understanding my trauma reactivity, my trauma patterns, the addictive principles, the dependency to substances, self-medication, all of that came to light through this treatment program.
Hmm.
And it really made me understand that I had none of these dependencies or addictions until the Marine Corps.
Right.
And so through that program, they pushed me to get evaluated for PTSD. And at that time, I hadn't done anything around PTSD,
Hmm.
and it was a long running undercurrent in our unit that if you claim PTSD, you're a bitch. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of the running lingo of any infantry unit.
Right.
You can't
Right.
handle your job. You
Right.
mentally can't handle your job. It's like, well, when you get when you're close to explosions
Yeah.
and you're getting shot at and all of these things that happen, it does get lodged in the back of your subconscious.
You guys see things that nobody will ever couldn't even imagine. And now looking forward 10 years ahead now in 2021, 2022, 2023,
Hmm.
PTSD is the biggest. I mean, we look back, so many military vet friends I have and I see, and the story's all the same. The story's very similar to what your story is. And it's just a shame that we have done this to our military. But I think it's waking up, and I think for a lot of us, they're finding different avenues because the state. A lot of people don't understand the military mindset when you see some of the things you see. It's pretty devastating. So
Hmm.
then, so then, like most, we go through these up and down valleys. So take us to like where Alan finally discovered the medicine. Where was the medicine finally discovered? Where did you finally say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to dive into this? Because I know, just being a friend of yours, there was some profound changes you've made in the last few years.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So tell us how that all began. Because I know during that time span here, you also have a young daughter. I think,
Hmm.
did you get married or did you not?
I did. I was married from 2014 to we finalized our divorce in 2021.
Yeah.
So that's rather fresh. But
Right.
I would say that coming to the medicine,
What
there's
was your
the
first experience? Was it Aya? What was your first medicine journey?
I would say the first medicine um, was MDMA.
MDMA?
Definitely.
Hmm.
I started experimenting with that because I had at that time, this was 2008 to 2009, I was kind of downturning um, my Marine Corps career. I was getting out, I was separating. And that was also when I was doing the most amount of research into how do I get in front of this like alcoholism that I'm developing.
Hmm.
And I saw a lot of good things about MDMA in the 80s was used in clinical trials to be able to cure depression, and had actually been heralded as something that would be really beneficial to mental health. I mean, now 40 years later, we're implementing those things.
Absolutely.
But yeah, experimenting with that definitely opened my eyes up. I noticed the nervous system change. I wasn't as dependent on alcohol. I wasn't as dependent on like this like constant need for stimulation. I started seeing a change in my psyche where I was getting back to like a calming sensation, like reading more, writing more, getting more into my art. But I think it was after that initial like DUI I received. I was when I was living in Tampa. Shortly after that happened, I believe was the first time I was introduced to mushrooms, and I believe they were the blue ones. We got them from a trusted source that had confirmed they were from Oaxaca, Mexico,
Hmm.
that spiritual center. And man, it cracked me wide open. Just, I mean, if anyone's used medicine in the entheogenic sense and understood the adage "you are the medicine" or "I am the medicine," like we have these chemical compounds that and neurotransmitters that come out when you're on these psychedelics, especially psilocybin. It helps kind of rewire the brain, and the brain communicates to itself a little differently.
Right.
And I had noticed just in that journey alone, it was with some close friends at our apartment. We had sober friends watching us, and just the connectivity I felt from that first initial experience with my friends, with myself, with my environment, with God, with the universe, with my own spirit, and all of these things. It just really showed me how I've been doing a disservice to myself.
Right.
And I was adopting mindsets and habits that weren't even mine, but I was so inundated within the culture of the Marine Corps. Like hell, the Marine Corps was created in a bar, Tun
Right.
Tavern.
Hmm.
And that's one of like the legends and the things that as Marines when we're around we goof off about and talk about, and that's like part of the legend of being a Marine and having that prestige.
Right.
But getting out, you don't have that there. You don't have that container. You don't have your buddies. You don't have that echo chamber, or that feedback, that reflection.
Yeah.
So being on my own journey again, and diving into not only entheogens and how that first experience with mushrooms really opened me up. I was also very, very dedicated and curious about meditative techniques, breath work, transcendental meditation, and all of this was culminating at this time in 2010. So 2009. I think around fall time of 2009 was when I got this DUI. I was going through the court legal system, and that was also subsequently when I had my first experience with mushrooms.
Mhm.
Um, it showed me how I needed to be sober, all of the things that I needed to implement and integrate into my life. But at that time, all I could do was just sit in Tampa because I was on probation.
Right.
So luckily at that time I had my own laptop, and I would just sit there for hours, Mark, like day after day after day on YouTube, looking at guided meditations. I was connected to like some online spiritual communities, always asking questions, always trying to discern between my mental health, my spiritual acuity and attunement, and really, really, really honing in on what I want, what I'm looking for, what I'm trying to integrate into myself, so that I can then show up better for others. And it's easy to say that now, but then I would imagine that it was all selfish. I was just trying to figure out what was going on with my head, in my heart, why I had all of these nightmares and all of this issue, all of these things that I couldn't seem to solve on my own.
And that, I mean, that's okay too, to be selfish. And then
Hmm.
you had these breakthrough experiences. And like most of us, we try to find different modalities that kind of center us. And
For
that's what
sure.
happened to you. And then you stayed on this path, and then you discovered some different options, or was there some trouble in between 2010 to 2019? I think it was 2020, right?
Oh yeah, what a yeah, that's all. Yeah, solid decade. There's definitely some ups and downs in that decade.
Yeah.
Um, Well, I met my ex-wife. I had moved back home from Tampa. I was trying to get closer to God, just closer to my family. I had been isolated in Tampa just honestly because of my addictions and the choices I made. Put me on probation. I was really low on money, even though I was working. I was going through my treatments. I was doing my personal just exploration, practice, and training of myself and my mind through what I could find through guided meditations and programs online that I would find. And this was in the infancy. You know what I mean? Like a decade ago, these communities that are available now were hardly even spoken of, let alone known of.
Right.
So
Now they're everywhere. Now they're
yeah,
everywhere
what
now.
a blessing. What a
Yeah,
blessing, you know?
for sure, for sure.
It's
Because
it's
where
a
else do
beautiful
we
sight.
go to? Where else do we drive to? I mean, let's look at, like all of us, I mean, we just don't come to these medicines because we say, oh, we want to wake up one day and do ayahuasca. We want to do some 5 grams of mushrooms for our journey. We are stuck. We don't understand
Hmm.
why we're doing what we're doing. And we know talk therapy doesn't work. We know alcohol for sure doesn't work. Alcohol's alcohol is just,
It's just
I think,
alcohol is basically a liquid opiate. It,
it's
it
all
affects the same brain, the brain center, the reward centers as opiates. It's a barbiturate. It's a depressant.
yep,
It has no beneficial neurological effect. It
absolutely zero.
degrades the body. It has a way of siphoning the B vitamins right out of your joints and ligaments. So
Absolutely. But it's legal. Isn't that funny? But it's legal.
there's a lot
But
of
all
money
these
in it.
plant
There's a lot of
medicines, oh,
money in it.
absolutely. Once they found out how to make money on plant medicines, those would be legal too.
Can't make
So
your
now
own moonshine though. Can't do that.
right, right. Let's jump into let's jump into where where I started my whole journey, and that's at Soul Quest in Orlando. And I think you started there too. Let's talk a little bit about Soul Quest, and
Sure.
let's talk about where in the church in general. We don't have to mention the names, but these first experiences of a really deep medicine like ayahuasca or 5-MeO or iboga. You know, these things are profound. And let's talk about what it did for you to, because I know there's been some struggles after. We all have struggles after these
Yeah.
medicines. These medicines aren't a cure all, but they are about they will give you a solid foundation if you're willing to accept it. So tell us about these experiences, your first experience with ayahuasca. Tell us what happened then.
For sure. Well, just a little background. 2019 was when I first came to the medicine. At that time, uh, that was when my ex-wife and I really split up. Finally split up. I had noticed again. I started leaning on alcohol. Even though I
And
was
that's
going to
tough in
church,
general.
yeah,
That's really tough in general to now, here you go again. Here's somebody else leaving your life. Okay. You had the military friends leaving you. Now you have your wife, somebody you love leaving your life. So here
yeah.
we go. Now you're diving into these medicines. So go ahead.
hmm
Sorry to interrupt you.
And no, but that's such a beautiful way to put a focal point on it, because what I noticed was each time that I got really good on my mental health, my physical health, my homeostasis, I would always be in some semblance of like solitude or aloneness.
Mhm.
And then I would invite people back in my life, or people would start gravitating back to my life, and then I would become almost hyper dependent on their involvement in my life and attached to them. And then again, I would make them the focal point, trying to be whatever they wanted me to be. And I let's just use my marriage. Being a father is a huge role. Being a husband is a huge role. And wanting to be a provider. I mean, we all have our own ideals of what it means to be a good provider, a father, a mother, a husband, a wife. And I really wanted to embody that for my family. However, I again was still dealing with my own issues. Arguing in front of our children was tearing me in half, and it was only further exemplifying how I needed to do more work.
Right.
When my ex-wife left me at that time in September, I was like, okay, this is the pocket of time. I had just recently got let go from a job I loved. I was an aquatic coordinator at the YMCA. Um, I was coaching kids. I love being in the water. It's my second home.
Mhm.
But basically, right there at the end of the summer of 2019, everything fell apart. I was single, trying to resolve my marital home, trying to also hone in on how did I get myself here?
Right.
How did I find myself in the same place that I've been trying to heal from, move from, get unstuck from? In 2019, after I had already done all this great work, integrated it, implemented it, was on a high path, doing everything I needed to do for myself, being
Right.
selfish in an altruistic way, not in a fuck everybody
So
way, but in a way
totally.
that like I was being able to give to the community better because I was
Mhm.
giving to myself better.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Mark, it was dark, man. 2019 was hard for me. The moment I realized I was slipping back into using alcohol, I was like, fuck this. I started looking into every outlet. I was like, I felt the call to ayahuasca. I had been studying it for years, documentaries, looking at Gabamate um, uh, talks and seminars he has done, just the whole thing. And I got my passport. I got all of the things that I needed to go to Costa Rica or Peru or Brazil, wherever I needed it. Like I
You
needed
were
it at that
ready.
moment.
You were
Yeah.
ready. Yeah.
And so I even looked up like veterans programs, and luckily that's how I found SoulQuest. Was
Yep.
at that time they had a very prominent veterans program. They still have a veterans program through the Warriors Retreat Alliance,
Yep.
and that's Justin Smith and Daniel Murray. They still operate that, and that's actually spanned into a network of other churches.
Yep.
I think it started and connected through SoulQuest, but then has branched out, and there's so many great churches
So
and
important.
veterans
Yeah.
and individuals that are connected to that. It's just astounding.
Yep.
But yeah, when I first I got my intake done by Justin Smith. That felt really good. It felt like I was not being so much questioned on my spiritual attunement and spiritual acuity and maybe the lingo and all the talk. And it was just like, what'd you suffer from? What have you been doing that the VA hasn't helped? What have you been looking for? What are you struggling from?
Mhm.
And I remember it very fondly because at that time there was a Wahlburgers in Orlando that we went and ate at, and we just had lunch together, and he kind of gave me some pointers of how the medicine might affect me and everything. And I just remember the intake was so compassionate. I met Carlos Guzman. He was the one that picked me up from the airport. He asked me and kind of gave me some guidance, and I've done so many journeys with Carlos Guzman. He's definitely a battle brother and someone I hold in high regards of the medicine work. He's a combo practitioner. He used to work out from Soul Quest, but yeah, oh man, so many good men.
And we'll
My
talk
first,
about that here. Yeah.
yeah,
But then you
yeah.
went on your journey, and then you went to ayahuasca in 2019. And
Mm-hmm.
after those experiences, I know, you know, they're profound. These experiences are profound. So
Yes.
something had to definitely happen for you to continue on this path because we all seem to find something. So what was it you think you found? What was it you think you found?
Um, Acceptance,
Yeah.
definitely.
Hmm.
And
Me
in the
too.
oddest way, the most odd way. Up to that point, I had always felt shame and guilt
Yeah.
around my emotional expressions because, like I said, for a lot of men, especially veterans that have been repressed in their expression, it looks like anger and it actually solidifies into rage,
Hmm.
something that can't be expressed and is very debilitating to the body as a whole, and then other people that are in the harm's way of those types of reactions and outbursts. So my first ayahuasca ceremony, I only did 1 cup, and it was profound, just that 1 cup. And up to that point, I did a 2 week dieta. I had done like a juice cleanse 3 days before. I had been completely sober, completely clean, and I think that really did boost the medicine. That 1st cup, I felt a semblance of peace. I did get some pretty amazing visuals. I remember sitting there and my eyes were closed, but I was seeing. You know what I mean? You know what I
I
mean?
get you. I totally
Everybody knows
understand.
what I mean if
Yeah.
you've been there.
Yeah.
But it was just beautiful. This kind of like light was coming across what I would, if I was looking up in a church, it would be like the dome of the church, and it just connected. And when it connected, it sparked, and it almost looked like lightning across the sky in my mind.
Right.
And when I felt that, it almost felt and visually represented that my synapses that had been so clouded and so calcified and so scarred from years of
Right. Open
abuse.
it up. Yeah.
Yeah, just whoa, just this
Hmm.
huge connection, internal visualization of light, literally looked like lightning. And
Hmm.
as it touched it, that lightning sparked across the dome of my brain, whatever visual cortex was understanding this, part of my visual cortex. And it just made this beautiful, effervescent, like rainbow lights throughout my mind. And I just laid back in that. And then I remember Justin Smith, he was the one kind of facilitating the ceremony, the first veteran ceremony at that time. He comes up and they're asking everybody if you want boosters. And at this time, I had a blanket over my head. I was kind of like in the cocoon state.
Right.
He says my name very slightly, very lightly. And I kind of come up and he's like, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay?" And I remember I looked at his face, right? But
Right.
that's not what I saw. I saw it looked like a mantis head. His eyes were huge and bulging, and I was like,
Yeah.
"I think I'm good, bro. I think I'm
Right.
solid right now."
Right. Right.
And I just laid back into the medicine, and it was very calming and very profound. However, that was the first one ever, and I think that Mama Aya was being very kind to me,
Hmm.
kind of like her initial very beautiful handshake. But you're
Yeah.
not there for that. You're there to get down into the deep gritty, at least for
Mhm.
me. I was
For me
there to
too.
solve all of this dirt, all of these things that were entrenched in my psyche and my soul and my heart, and I just didn't know where to start, you know. Well, that second night I did 2 cups, and the initial turbulence, as I call it, wasn't so bad, but the depth of the visuals were so beautiful that I didn't even realize I was so I get very vocal on the medicine, and I've learned that that's a way, because I was in a car wreck in 2016. Again, that was connected to my mental health and my VA experience and all of the trauma that I was going through and trying to heal through. But I have neuropathy and a lot of pain and things that I broke my neck in my C7, and then have a lot of neuropathy. So I felt through the spiritual attunement like I was needing to get my voice back, and oming, humming, certain ways of singing and things like that I loved to do, but I had lost that. And I think in that second ceremony, I was screaming out, or very boisterously saying, "It's so beautiful! It's so fucking beautiful!" Because all of the visuals were just so vivid and visceral, and I was just having this amazing experience. And someone had come over and said, "Hey, brother, you need to go internal. You need to like go inside." But they touched me, and when they touched me, I didn't realize that I had an aversion to touch at this time, and it immediately reminded me of a time in my Marine Corps where um, a group of us were punished, so on and so forth, for doing things during a training evolution, and as new Marines, we were blamed for it. But the way they went about punishing us is they beat our asses in a room full of 20 other guys so we couldn't defend ourselves.
Yeah.
And this actually came down, and it ended up in a court martial, and all of these guys got NJP'd and kicked out, and it was a whole fiasco, a whole debacle. But I did not realize how deeply I internalized that experience. I shoved it down. I repressed it so much that I didn't even realize that it had been a cornerstone of my defensiveness and my trauma and the things that I had gone through, because these were men that I was supposed to look up to as my superiors, as my chain of command, as my trusted peers. And here they are basically submitting us to their will through the threat of violence and actual violence.
Another form of PTSD.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this second ceremony, I didn't realize that that was what came up, and oh my gosh, Mark, I felt, like I said, I felt ashamed and guilty, because somehow that triggered me, and I it triggered rage inside of me, and I raged out. I had this jacket on, I threw my jacket off, and I was just raging out in front of 80 people, and they had to kind of hold me down, restrain me, and I wasn't losing control, but just the way the medicine was inviting me to tap into that anger, I was surrendering to it. I was not in any way, shape, or form expecting this.
Hmm.
It just came out of me. And um, at that time, Lance Supernall, Daniel Murray, and Carlos Guzman had to kind of help me through it, because I was having visceral visual remembrances of my combat experiences, of that time I got held down and beaten up in the Marine Corps for punishment,
Right.
other instances. And the way they handled it was so professional and so direct. Of course, I got rapéed,
Right.
and that was the first time I'd ever experienced rapé. Oh my gosh,
But that
and that
probably
felt.
ground that was a
Oh
necessary
yeah.
evil at that time.
Oh yes,
So
the purge. I was so stuck. The purge that rapé facilitated was so deep and so violent. I immediately recognized how it helped me, and I still had a difficult journey afterwards in integrating it.
mhm,
But that second night made me realize the depth of pain that I'm actually able to hold.
is deep.
It's very deep.
Yeah. So then that after that experience, I mean, you probably there's a lot to work through with that. And I mean, I know you've done a really good job with these integrations, like because I think for me and for most people, I believe that integration is the key. Integration
Yes.
is the key to this work. And I know you don't dive, you do really deep into that integration work. I mean, you would do a lot of volunteering at this church, you would get on these weekly meetings and these callings, but there was still I know for a friend, I could probably talk like this. There was still that lost space.
Yeah.
But then in the last couple, even months, I definitely see a very big expansion this into what you're doing with men in this communities and veterans awareness. So I mean, all these things take time. Like we always say, these medicines aren't a quick fix, but if you stay this path and you do the things that you're supposed to do, that your soul wants you to do, because it's all about reconnecting to your soul. I mean, this is
Amen.
all about connecting to where Alan was lost. Alan might have lost himself at 3 or 7. So you got to keep continually going back to those spaces. You know that as much as I do. So now we're into 2023. You've probably been through lots of experiences just like myself. But now your mental awareness is back. You're working with some great bunch of guys. I mean, listen, Carlos, all these people you're mentioning, we all have stayed the path. So there's something here. There's something about this. So let's go to where we are today. Today, what we're doing with men's work, and I see you work well a little bit with Agape Church, who phenomenal people down in Texas. So where are you today with veterans,
Hmm.
mental awareness, and mental health? What are we doing today? What is Alan's work looking like now and for the future? Because listen, veterans are left behind, man. Veterans are destroyed. They're left behind. There's so many studies right now. Like I think the biggest study is the Stanford study, and a bunch of my buddies are going to this study. So these guys are going to Stanford. I mean, just like Alan, just like all these guys coming out of the military. They're going down there and they're measuring their brainwaves and they're dead. They're actually dead. There's nothing there. They're going down doing Bufo. They're going down first doing Aboga and then ending off with the 5-MeO. These guys are coming back, lit up like Christmas trees, able to regenerate, refocus, and renavigate their lives because their lives have been unnavigatable till now. So I know you and I've seen your progress and I love what I see now. So where is this going with Alan and what you guys are doing with this group of guys?
Well, I'm really excited you brought all of that up. The integration, I definitely want to touch on that. That is key. That is key. You might as well, if you're not integrating the experiences that you're having, then you might as well just be going on a roller coaster just to say you rode a roller coaster.
Right.
But and that analogy can be a little slippery because I mean, there's sensations when you're on a roller coaster, ups and downs, G forces, all of that. And then when you get off, you're wobbly legged, you're a little spun out. Well, for me, like bringing it back to the experience, it's the depth of containment, the space that I'm able to hold. Um, over the years of working with ayahuasca um, and intimately within the community and volunteerism, I noticed this commonality in this thread that I would always either be in the right place to either help a man that was in a very difficult um, struggle in his psyche and his journey of the medicine. I found that I had this ability to really connect with men that were having a difficult time with anger issues, self-acceptance, a lot of that, and of course veterans as well. So my integrative experience over, I would say, from 2019 to 2001 was mainly just healing myself. 2001 to 2002 was understanding my interconnectedness with the community as a whole, and what's the medicine, my brand, if you will, of medicine that I'm bringing to the container. Um, a lot of my peers and mentors have told me that interrelational work, veterans work, and men's work is and shadow work are I crush it. I crush it. To use my own words, I like to bring a level of compassion and empathy
Right.
to the container that I feel sometimes, like you said, can be lacking towards veterans because there's this almost predisposition that veterans are strong. Veterans can handle themselves. I mean, yeah, we are strong, but that's because we've been carrying huge amounts of weight over long distances. And that feeling of strength can wane, especially when you're not, like I said, not around like-minded individuals and people that have that same experience. So it is possible to feel lost. You spoke about that with me, and to be honest, in all integrity, my feeling of loss came from a very tumultuous time from 2016 to 2019 with, oh man, them actually giving me the diagnosis of PTSD. The VA actually diagnosed me with PTSD, made it a service connection of total and permanent, which means that it'll never go away. My symptoms will always be there. The issues that I have will always be there. At that same time, my stepdaughter had cancer. She had leukemia. We had to fight through that. It put a huge strain on my marriage. And then through us trying to work it out, we realized it would be better for our children to separate, and that way we wouldn't be further creating a container for them that would be toxic, and show them that like the anger that we were both perpetuating was normal. And I found in the community my ability to serve others, but the loss was my attachment to the role as a father. That role has, for me, taken it's how would I say it? Whereas before I was in the height of my life, and the like, I had what I wanted. I had my purpose as a father. I had my purpose as a husband. I had my life as an aquatics coordinator and coach. And at that time, I had a lot of meaning. I had a lot of feedback. I had a lot of things that were not only outlets, but I was getting returns from that outlet. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I found in myself that when I would do this volunteerism, and I would do, I would even when I would facilitate ceremonies, those were the ones that woke me up to my need to create this neutral space in myself.
Right.
Meeting myself halfway, learning how to ask questions like, why are you so angry right now? Why are you angry? Why are you upset? What are you expecting here that you're kind of creating this story that you're feeding into, and not allowing me to show up as, I guess,
Well, that's integration. You know,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and all of
you're
that, I'm
talking
trying to
back
speak
to
to the
yourself, right?
integration. All of, I
Exactly.
mean, I could speak on every different experience, but the integration is what I want to speak on most, because that's what I was getting to understand, was why do I feel like, even as you said it, like other people had noticed, like, why do you keep coming back here? Why are you doing this work? Why are you doing this? It's like, well, because I lost a lot.
Mhm,
I sacrificed a lot.
mhm.
And I think that speaks to growth.
Yeah,
How can you have more of something if you can't let go of what's taking the place of what you want?
yeah, for sure.
And I like to use the analogy, if you have two hands and you have hate in one and love in the other, and you don't want this hate, you got to put that down. So now you're left with an absence, an abscess, this empty feeling where there used to be hate. And a lot of people will see that as grief, or they'll fill that void with something else. Really, you just need to put a little more love in it and
Yeah,
balance it out.
yeah. But people,
And
it's hard to understand that until you start doing it.
yes,
So it's
yes,
very hard. And you've mentioned a lot of times on these, even on this call, about anger. And anger is just a huge form of sadness, man. That's
it is.
all that's all it amounts down to be. That's all it is. And you know, who wouldn't be sad? Who wouldn't be sad? Like for myself, what I've been through and what you've been through and what we've all been through, everybody's sadness is a little different. So who are we to judge whose sadness is worse than somebody else's?
Amen. Amen.
We are all here. We all come to this path for a reason. There's no reason, there's no other reason, because we want to find who we truly are. So I think you're really finding who Alan truly is in the last few years. And I think you say it, you've surrounded yourself around the right people. You're integrating, you know, on no cause of your own, but it's just been part of your path. It's just been part of your life. PTSD is part of what Alan's going to be, and that's okay. So,
Yeah, and with that, I recognize that I was given a choice to. It's an invitation to sit in that suffering, allow this
right,
PTSD to control me and to guide my life, or recognize that it is a part of me just as much as my hand is a part of me. And if I injure my hand, I'm going to do something to get that hand's motion back and its strength back. So the intention that I set out with in 2006, when I first realized how bad my PTSD was, even without a diagnosis, was I'm going to do whatever it takes on this path, whatever it takes to get back to a healthier me so I can be what others need me to be and myself what I need to be. The anger, speaking to the anger, yeah, that, I mean, how can you not be angry when you wake up and you realize you've been making all these choices, and you have to sit there and accept, you have to admit it to yourself at some point. I think this is the biggest part of integration. You have to admit it at some point that you are the progenitor, the cause and the effect of your life. You can go through all of the medicine ceremonies and you can still have spiritual bypassing and cognitive dissonance. Your mind is designed to protect itself from its own awareness.
Right.
So it takes a huge amount of work, a huge amount of intention, a huge amount of discipline and consistency to get to a point to where your mind drops its own bullshit stories and you go, I am doing this to myself. Even if you even if you feel like what you're doing is wrong, if you can get aside from that right and wrong and kind of segue back into this has all been a learning experience. Any amount of drugs you've done, any amount of addictions, any amount of addictions can be food. It can be anything,
Addiction can
anything
be,
that's could yeah, anything that's distracting you from getting real with yourself and getting true to why you're doing this.
yeah.
And if you can hold to that intention that even though you did all these things and you can let go of the shame and you can let go of this like negative self-talk that seems to just come out of nowhere with all of this work, on the other side is a you that understands why you did it.
Hmm.
And that you is waiting there patiently to be reintegrated. And see, a lot of what I'm trying to speak on right now actually involves my shadow work that I do.
Yeah.
So like I said, from last year 2002 to 2003, I actually made a promise to myself. I challenged myself and I did a deeper intention. Last May I got back into the medicine.
Right.
I had been away from the medicine. I usually take the winter time
Hmm.
to integrate my own experiences. I had gone through an initiatory ceremony under the traditions of the Q'ero people from Peru,
Right.
and just at the baseline, it kind of reconnects you to the normal cycles of Earth. Winter being a time of hibernation and death, spring
Right.
being regrowth and reborn and renewal, summer being the time for explosive growth and all of that, and then fall being that falling away, and all of these coincide with the north, south, east, and west, and the directions. And so in the wintertime, I try to heed that call, listen to my body, slow down. And then in the springtime, my birthday last year, May 12th, I went to Agape. And the synchronicity around that was at that time, there was a full blood moon eclipse in Scorpio.
Mm.
And I don't delve too much into astrology, but I do understand its awarenesses and the subtleties of how the planets do affect us. So I felt it was very serendipitous that I have my moon is in Scorpio. So I deal a lot with very deep emotions. It feels like I'm drowning in an ocean of emotions a lot of time, which is just another invitation to learn how to swim better. But
Right. Exactly.
I digress. So I really in oh man, that was such a powerful weekend. It was I got such a depth of purge from it. Also, it was facilitated by Taita Pedro de Villa. He's a very prominent shaman
Sure.
from Colombia, and
And I
I
mean,
always
and just Agape itself with,
yes.
I mean, those two are just amazing souls. I mean,
Raquel and Sergio are just
yeah.
amazing. I see both of them as like my soul family. Their beautiful daughter Aya had just had her first birthday. Their extended family too.
Yeah.
I love their community, the way they hold ceremony. It's very traditional. It's
And if everybody's
beautiful.
in anybody's in Texas, that is a beautiful place
Yes,
to go. You know,
yes,
Agape, that is a great ceremony spot, and they love veterans there. They do a
they
lot
do.
for veterans there. So,
Hmm.
we're gonna end this pretty soon, Alan. So why don't we do this? Why don't we tell a little bit about people where you're at, what you have gotten out of this medicine, and where you think the psychedelics are going for mental health in the
Ooh.
veterans.
Great questions. Well, right now I am continuing my one-on-one work. I still kind of keep an open door policy with any of the men and women that I work with in the containers that I volunteer for. I do one-on-one work, open door kind of work. If anything is revolving around depth psychology, I kind of segue into shadow work. I've been studying and practicing under Stephen Tuig
Yeah.
and the Shadow Tribe program and mental cleanse and mental mastery programs that he has. I love it. I am just eating that up. Jungian
Well, I think
psychology, all of that has been beneficial to me along the path as well for integration.
those are definitely going to be hopefully a big part of our platform moving forward in the future, because shadow work is all the work. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about shadow work is like, I didn't understand shadow work in the beginning, but I totally do now. Everything's about going inside back into you. So,
Hmm.
all these medicines, that's where they take you back inside of you. I think these people are, you know, you had told a really great story today. This is what we're doing this for, Ellen. This is why we're here, you know. And what's a big reinforcement for me is during this conversation, and I might tear up here, but you said you went back to the medicine. You said I went back. And that's just really cool because you knew where it started. So you knew where to start again. And
Yes,
I love
sir.
it. I love you, man.
I love you too, and I want to close with that. Don't give up. Don't give up. There's going to be so many pitfalls and so many detours along this path. Like you're gonna feel that doubt, and I just want to say to anyone that does feel that doubt, that's good. That's
Yeah.
self-awareness.
Yep.
Because if you're in this ego of I know everything, I'm healing, that can create pitfalls of a false sense of accomplishment. Like this work needs to be consistent.
Yep.
But as long as you're making even small changes day in and day out, it doesn't have to be this big, humongous celebration. It can be just like tiny victories every day. And as long as you celebrate those tiny victories, they're going to compound.
Yep.
And it helps shift your mind from all of the trauma, all of the bad things that occurred, and makes you realize these were just learning experiences to get you to the ability to help others through the same experience. And
Yeah.
that's what I've taken away from my shadow work, from the medicine work. At the depth of it all, it's just shown me the strength I have to help me hold myself together, and then also give that to others
Right.
through whatever container, through medicine work, through facilitating ceremonies, through one-on-one work, talk therapy, and shadow work. It's a
Yeah.
passion of mine now. I integrate these modalities and these teachings daily, and
Mhm.
they've done nothing but improve my mental health, my spiritual connection, my familial bonds, and my agape, my universal love
Yep.
for my fellow brothers and sisters on this path. And I mean, I'm humbled and honored to be a part of it all.
Yeah. Thank you, brother, for doing everything you do.
Thank you, Mark.